It was in 1884 when a young Leon Breitling in Saint-Imier, Switzerland set up shop, naming his company the G. Leon Breitling Montbrilliant Watch Factory. Saint-Imier is a municipality located in the Berny-Jura administrative district in the canton of Bern, Switzerland, nestled within the Jura mountain range. The Jura region, also known as the Jura Triangle, encompassing parts of France, Germany, and Switzerland, has been a significant locale for the development of watchmaking. The Suze, or La Suze, or Schuss in German, runs through Saint-Imier and snakes all the way to Biobien. You may have heard as another significant watchmaking hub. Breitling himself was actually born there, and like the man behind Longines, realized hydropower was the perfect power source to literally turn the cogs of his operation. From the start, Breitling had a penchant for chronology, and the startup focused their efforts on crafting precision timers and timing chronographs as pioneers in aviation were focusing their efforts on conquering the skies for the very first time. After his passing in 1914, his son Gaston took the reins and continued his father's legacy, further expanding the business and quickly cementing Breitling as the preeminent aviation watchmaking house. In the 1930s, Breitling saw massive growth under Gaston's son, who oversaw production of Breitling's precision chronographs for the British Royal Air Force during World War II, and he developed partnerships with the American military. Success after success led Breitling to develop the Navitimer, released in 1954, which is exactly what brings us here today. In this hands-on review, we'll be taking an in-depth look at the latest iteration in a long line of Navitimer history with the B01 Chronograph 43. A classically styled 369 chronograph with archetypal mid-century Navitimer cues. With our recent pilot watch guide and Breitling's announcement of the new colorful 32mm and 36mm Navitimer models, now seems like the perfect time to revisit this classic. We've spoken to what makes a watch significant, and often it's a feat of firsts. In the case of the Breitling Navitimer, up until the invention of the electronic calculators of the 60s and 70s, certain aviation calculations required the use of a slide ruler with a logarithmic scale. When the U.S. Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association approached Breitling, they set out to create the first dedicated aviation watch with a built-in slide rule for making complex calculations right on the wrist. Calculations like average speed, distance traveled, fuel consumption, rate of climb or descent, and conversion of miles to kilometers or nautical miles. You could say, in a manner of speaking, that the Navitimer was one of the very first mechanical smartwatches by taking the rough idea of the 40s chronomat and refining it for actual utility. Decade after decade, the Navitimer continued evolving, but it never lost its audience. Externally, what you see now is not all too dissimilar from the appearance of the original, give or take a few components. But the DNA is certainly there. The large case with a prominent edge-to-edge dial, the sharp bezel, a narrow case band, and very traditional pushers at the 2 and 4. Make no mistake, the Navitimer of today is a luxury piece, and while it still has its original toolish dial, the $9,300 MSRP speaks to its use case, with the slide rule largely becoming obsolete in just about every imaginable situation, with modern tech packed into modern planes. But that's not to say it's entirely useless, and we'll get to that in just a bit. However, the charm persists, and for those who already love the oversized pilot watch aesthetic, but don't align with the minimalism of a Flieger, the highly technical dial composition of the Navitimer just may be the ticket. Traditional as it may be, as Breitling lays out in the name, this specific Navitimer uses a 43mm case, which is a 3mm increase from the 50s menage between Breitling and the AOPA, which produced the 806. There's also a 35mm, a 38mm, a 41mm, and a 46mm. So if you were concerned about sizing, Breitling's way ahead of you. But you can't just look at the diameter for an accurate representation of the wearing experience, as Breitling in recent years have made a few adjustments to the lug-to-lug to make it even more accommodating for smaller wrist sizes. In other words, by implementing shorter lugs at 49mm even. It's also pretty thin in proportion to the diameter of the case, with a 13.6mm thickness that does a nice job of hugging the wrist. As the original was a dedicated tool watch, the case needed to be durable, and the stainless steel unit is extremely tough looking, and sporty, with equal parts high polish and brushing across the traditional case shape. Despite its durability, this pilot watch doesn't afford an enormous amount of water resistance, 3 bars, so splash resistant at best, but fine to clean with a damp cloth. To the north and the south of the knurled push-pull crown, the action of the pushers is what you'd expect, you would hope, from a $10,000 chronograph. Precise with heavy clicks and no shake whatsoever. You'll have a hard time finding anything else like it at this price range. We'll talk more about the actual chronograph movement in just a moment, but you do get a front row seat on the 180 via the screwed-in sapphire caseback. Obviously, what makes the Navitimer special is the bi-directional inner rotating logarithmic sliding scale, sitting behind the large near edge-to-edge sapphire crystal. The Navitimer's dial, Navi short for navigation, and timer, well, or sure you can figure that part out, is absolutely packed to the brim with utility. The variant we have here uses a panda color scheme across the dial with a trio of 3, 6, 9 subdials and an offset date window at the 4. But the inner circle's timing subdials controlled by the 2 o'clock pusher, just like any other chronograph, isn't the complicated part. That would be the slide rule. So how does the Navitimer work? Although there isn't much use case for such a scale now that first debuted on the chronomat for scientists years before the Navitimer, seeing as you can make these calculations far more accurately with modern electronic instruments, if you're going to pay nearly $10,000 for a watch, you ought to know how it works. All calculations including multiplication, division, airspeed, distance traveled, fuel consumption, rate of climb and descent, and conversion of miles to kilometers or nautical miles, happens with the rotational position of the bidirectional outer bezel relative to the fixed inner dial. First things first, we have to establish on the fixed component what 0 is, and in this case it's called the index. In math speak, on a logarithmic scale, the first number on the slide rule scale is 1 because the log of 0 is 1. Along with this, you'll notice that our 0 reference doesn't actually read 0, but it reads 10. Instead, all you need to know is that the red index pulls double duty here, and that you can read it as either your index point, 0, or 10, depending on the calculations you're making. Which is to say, Breitling doesn't include any decimals on the Navitimer. We won't pretend to be proficient in any actual aviation calculations, but since most calculations will revolve around multiplication and division anyway, here's how that works. Let's say we want to multiply 15 by 5. Take 15, align it with the inner red index, and once in position, locate 5 on the inner section. In this case, 5 is going to be 50 as the numerals on this scale function twofold, like we said. Now, on the outer scale, just above where the 5 or 50 in this case is positioned on the inner ring, it should read as 75 on the outer ring. 5 times 15 equals 75. The same holds true for division, except we're going to repeat the steps in the other direction. Let's do 20 divided by 5. Rotate the outer bezel and place the 20 over the 5, or again 50 in this case. Now, wherever the index lands will be your answer on the outer track, in this case 40. Add the decimal and we've got 4. Like we said, fairly rudimentary calculations, but for anything more complex, Breitling confirms on page 10 of the Navitimer's user manual that mastery will require a little time and patience. Making the Navitimer's impressive chronological functionality possible is the B01 caliber released in 2009. Other than its impressive 70-hour power reserve and 4 Hz beat rate that comes COSC chronometer certified, the column wheel style construction is a throwback to the Navitimer's early days that allows the pushers to operate with a smoothness unmatched by any other methods. The pushers are sharp and extremely satisfying, and let us be even more specific when we say smooth in reference to the pushers. Ever notice on a cheaper chronograph that the timing hand may jump or move when engaging or disengaging the pusher to start, stop, or reset? Not the case with the Navitimer, so what you're paying for is tight, exacting tolerances in terms of the caliber's machining to achieve this level of precision. In total, there are 6 hands across the dial, an hour and minute handset inset with loom, a bright red chronograph seconds hand, and 3 matching subdial hands centered at the 3, 6, and 9, or 1/4 second, 30 minute, and 12 hours respectively. Impressive as it is, the B01 caliber isn't exclusive to the Navitimer, having been integrated into a few Breitling references including the Super Ocean Heritage, the Premier, and the Chronomat. Value is obviously a word that gets thrown around a lot in the watch space, and for good reason. If you'll be paying the price of a decent used car for something your phone can do at a fraction of the cost, you want to absolutely squeeze the greatest amount of value out of the purchase, or at least know the purchase you're making is justified. Breitling has one of the most advanced in-house manufacturing facilities, and the B01 is one of many in-house Breitling creations. Which is all to say, you're not forking up an arm and a leg for something just any watchmaker can get their hands on. It's exclusivity that adds to the overall MSRP. Securing this particular Navitimer onto the wrist is a very plush black alligator leather strap with a bright yellow leather backing, which, in our opinion, does a great job of tying the whole look together by matching the dial's monochrome colorway while adding in a bit of character underneath. As the case diameter is large, not nearly as large as the 46, but still large, it's important to know that you're better off selecting the exact bracelet or strap you want from Breitling from the start, since finding a suitable 22mm replacement could pose a bit of a challenge. Value is contextual, and that it requires a great deal of comparison, of looking elsewhere when asking the age-old question, is it worth it? If you can't see the value in over 140 years of Swiss history, full in-house manufacturing, and exclusive dial functions, then maybe the Navitimer isn't for you. But if you've been looking for a luxury chronograph with actual aviation history and a toolset that's rolled over from day one, not just a piece of eye candy, the Breitling Navitimer 43 is the de facto choice. So as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Is the Navitimer for you? Drop us a line and let us know.